today's topics. So essentially, we're going to start with talking about, well, what are the care options that do exist when people face that fork in the road that they're sometimes find themselves without a choice, but having to make a choice between the two. What is the right setting? We're going to then talk a little bit about what it looks like to have care at home, but then we're going to transition to talking about some of the myths that exist about some of the nursing care living situations, which Kenny will speak about. We want to give you a pretty clear idea also as to what are the cost differences between these. Is there any means of assistance in paying for some of these different options? And what could help with paying for that? Why do most people want to age in place? Why do people then choose to not age in place, but transition to a next new and better community for their particular needs, and the advantages of moving to a senior community? Now, our presentation will cover all these in a slightly different linear fashion, but let's go ahead and start off with talking about the decision. So, the space that we all live in, our environment, is powerful at how it shapes us. It supports us, it nourishes us, or works against us in many different ways. And if you were to just simply look at the question as a matter of preferences, most of humans and most of those who are aging prefer initially, if that being the only consideration, to be able to age in place, um, you know, um, with their home. But as you can see here, who needs the care? Two-thirds of those 75 and older are people who need care now. Now, 75 back in a century ago may have really seemed like that's pretty old, but many of you are likely know people or in this age bracket and know that you still got plenty of time left. But to know that more than half of people that are in that bracket need some kind of assistance is a pretty astonishing number. And 75% of the same age group will need care just another 6 years from now. So, as I said, your situation is very important. Your environment affects your physical well being and health, it affects your mental status and well being, it has a big impact on your financial situation, and where you live also directly impacts your proximity and access to family, to friends, to neighborhood, to activities, and other things that compose our lifestyle, which also affects, is a major social determinant of health. So I apologize for being just a slide early in terms of talking about why some people might go to one option on that path, which is reasons to stay home. And I cited the statistic in 2020 by AARP that said that 8 out of 10 people prefer to age in place, again, if they have a choice, and that's the only thing that's coming into it. The four walls of our home, where we build and make our memories, are again a powerful part of that environment. And there's actually a lot of social and relational health that comes in being able to stay in the same place and not experiencing change, especially if part of someone's aging challenges have to do with cognitive decline or even dementia. Keeping stability in the environment can be something that contributes to health. What are some other reasons that people might want to stay at home, besides the fact that it's familiar and it's comfortable and it's home? Um, well, you might want to stay there to maintain independence, but I mean this in a couple of different ways. One is that if it can maintain your independence as well as your connection into your community. Part of your environment isn't just the building you're in, it's the neighbors that are on your street. It's the routines that take place living in a particular neighborhood. When you see the school bus coming by, um, the proximity that you have to the local fixtures that you tend to frequent, whether they be restaurants, whether it be the closest gym, whether it be an activity center, or whether it be a park, or even just your regular stroll that you do take through the neighborhood. Maintaining consistency in what's familiar in the environment goes beyond four walls, and being able to stay in that home allows that chapter and those components of a life to be able to remain the same. When people do start to have either mental or physical challenges, independence is the important thing that begins to be threatened. But it is possible through having in-home care through caregivers to help be able to kind of plug the holes in the dike, to provide the necessary support, to help people get the necessary assistance in the areas where their independence is not as strong, and to be able to continue to stay in this familiar place. Another thing with in-home care is that you do pay for what you get for it. If you just need a little bit of help, well, you're only going to be paying for a little bit of help. If you need a lot of help, well, that dollar amount can get larger because you're paying for more hours. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics in a minute. But for people that just need independence in a couple areas of life, maybe it's time to take the keys away for driving, but transportation to appointments to grocery stores is an important element. Or maybe you can generally take care of yourself, but there's some parts of just maintaining the house that have become a little bit more dangerous to do on your own due to being a fall risk. Hiring a little bit of home care help can work well in a budget where there's going to be at least a minimum financial commitment to move into some of the other options that Kenny will discuss later, assuming that there is no outside assistance in paying for those. You can also tailor the support you need to your individual needs, similar to what we've been discussing. It prevents the kind of sadness of adjustment that can come with detaching from that place that you've called home for so many years. And as I mentioned earlier, there's studies that show that stability of environment, just like stability of people and relationships, could have a mitigating effect against the progress of memory loss. Many of you, perhaps during COVID or otherwise, maybe had a friend or a parent or a neighbor who was somewhere on their journey with dementia. And a hospitalizing event, perhaps from COVID, perhaps from a fall, the disorientation that comes from that often has people that are on kind of a slow and steady journey downward can take a real drop in a plateau because of that disruption that takes place. Preventing the things that could cause a hospitalization by getting support at home and staying home is one way to prevent some of those drops. So let's just talk a little bit more about what it does look like to get in-home care from a caregiver or a home care aide there in your home. As we referenced, generally you get this staffed by the hour. So however many hours you need is the hours that you can request. Now, there's a couple things that our wonderful state of California has in place, genuinely looking forward for the health and well-being of everyone, but provides some limitations on what a caregiver can do. I'll give you a caveat. I'm sure some of you may know someone or people that operate outside of this, but we do want you to know what the state and the Department of Health and Department of Social Services say or can and can't do for a caregiver. And one is that they cannot, the proper word would probably actually be manage or dispense medication. So caregivers can often bring medication, bring a cup for water, bring perhaps some yogurt in a spoon, and remind and give the tools and assistance to allow somebody to take medication. But they're not supposed to be opening those vials from the pharmacy, organizing them into some kind of organizing system. That's more of what would be considered medication management. And even though it may not be rocket science, we're likely managing our own medications all the time because of the risk of having maybe an extra pill go into the same day. That's a particular liability risk the state says should be done by a family member or some other higher level nursing service. Said we want to give you a little bit more idea of what does the price of home care in Los Angeles and Orange County look like these days. Typically, if you're going to be getting care from a licensed, bonded, and insured home care provider and have these securities that come along with that, you're looking at somewhere in the $30 to $40 per hour range. Now, with our particular organization, Living Home Care, we do go below this actually just a little bit, but this is pretty typical. And the greatest factor that determines whether you're on that 30 or whether you're on that 40 is how many hours of help that you need. Most organizations are looking to discount that rate the more hours somebody requires because they're trying to make that budget work as best as they can. Now, there's flexibility, and really you would have to speak with any given licensed home care provider, but most of them have a 4-hour minimum in terms of how long that shift can be. And even though you might feel a senior maybe just needs a couple hours to get a bath and have breakfast made, that 4-hour minimum is really built to create stability. Stability both for the care provider, because it can be very difficult to piece together a full day's worth of work if you just have little 1 and 2 hour shifts here and there. But when a caregiver has more financial stability in longer work, it makes them stickier. and it allows them to stay with that senior, and their relationship can last because economic instability isn't going to cause that caregiver to have to look for things elsewhere to provide for their family. So if we just do a little bit of math, let's assume somebody needed care all 7 days a week, 30 days within a month. If you take the low end of this range and you say you need 8 hours of care a day, that costs you about $7,200 a month. Now, again, you could be paying just, $1,500 a month if you're starting off with a couple of these 4-hour shifts each week. But the reason we have this number is because when Kenny begins to share, he's going to talk about what are the costs of moving per month into some of these other housing situations. And so I think thinking monthly for care that's all 30 days of the week, even though this is only 8 hours a day, compared to care all 30 days a week in some of these environments, it's just a good number for you to keep in mind. It isn't apples to oranges in terms of what you get having one-on-one support compared to a staff that's serving a whole community, but budget's very important. So keep that in mind as we do our comparisons. There's just a couple more things that I want to share with regards to the info on in-home care. And that's 2 slides here with kind of a grid comparing, well, what if I get in-home care by a licensed home care organization? But what if I also maybe hire care privately? And by that, I mean, look, posting an ad, perhaps on Craigslist or some classifieds, or putting a little tear off the bottom page in a local senior center, looking for help for somebody to come work with you that you would just pay directly and privately. I actually have, when we started working with one client, they actually went in and created an account in Indeed to be able to hire somebody directly. So who knows? It's not just companies. There could be an individual family or a person looking to hire somebody through even a job board like Indeed. But what are some of the differences in what you get? Well, first is the experience with hiring. As you can imagine, if a family or an individual is going to take on the responsibility of marketing the need for this job to be filled, of interviewing those individuals, of doing background checks and everything else that would satisfy whatever personal standards of safety you want to maintain, that's a significant investment of time. It's a huge blessing if you happen to have a friend or a neighbor who says, "Hey, I know Karen Caregiver who worked for helping a friend of mine or one of my parents. Maybe you could give them a call." That transfer of trust is huge, but we don't always have that. A benefit of working with a licensed home care organization is that they're constantly recruiting, but also constantly filtering out those people that have red flags and shouldn't really be the ones that are caring for seniors, but then retaining and training and deepening the skills of those who are a good fit. Second, insurance and liability. If you work with a licensed home care company, they also have to carry the necessary professional and general liability, as well as workers' compensation insurance. Now, it probably wouldn't surprise you. It might not be as high as construction workers, but the job category of in-home caregiver is a pretty high workers' comp rate because injuries abound. You can imagine the back injuries that come with lifting and transferring people who are weak and can't do that. There's a significant risk. And if a family does hire somebody individually and they do tweak their back, they do have a slip and fall, there could be some significant liability against the estate should that worker want to take some kind of legal action to recover for their medical bills and costs that they have. Now, it is possible that an individual family could go, and there are some insurance providers that will provide you workers' comp for just your one caregiver working for you directly. But here again, that's not often something that people think about when they think about the cost. And that's likely going to be increasing that cost by probably at least a good nearly 10%, give or take about 2%, depending on what the insurance market is. Sorry, I think I clicked a button to advance an extra slide here. Next is compliance. If you're working with a home care company, they can't maintain their licensure unless they are abiding by all of the state's requirements. This means requirements both for training. This means that they're compliant with California wage and hour. For any of you who are attorneys or know attorneys, you know that wage and hour lawsuits abound in our state. And we're fortunate that we have a state that wants to try to pursue fair and equitable compensation of individuals. But in the last 4 years, there have been a number of legislative pieces that have come out that actually directly impact the space of a family hiring a caregiver or somebody else, a domestic assistant, to come in and help with them. And there are lawsuits that exist, just like you see all the different injury and accident lawyer billboards that are on the freeway. You probably haven't seen one that said, hey, are you getting a pay stub for your in-home caregiver work? Give me a call if you're not. But there are attorneys out there drumming up business, connecting with caregivers to find caregivers who aren't getting a pay stub from the family that's hiring them, that don't have payroll taxes, FICA, Medicare, Social Security taken out. Because the California laws say that if you do hire a person and they're working with you full time, you do need to figure out a way to do that to remain compliant. Three other means of comparison here: training and competency. A home care company, again, each one is different, but they should have competent staff that is continuously training and investing in their team. I know here at Living Home Care, our care director is actually a retired nurse practitioner. And I think one of the richest benefits we offer to our team is to get a chance to come to our training lab where he trains them with our hospital bed, our medical mannequins, our lifting devices, so that people feel confident and able to handle any situation that they want to be able to assist their aging patients with. If you're hiring them privately, well, of course, any kind of missing skill sets, it would have to be up to that family to go ahead and to provide. And again, that's time away from work or other activities. Depth of service, by this, I'm kind of talking about backup. If there's one or two individuals a family is hired and one goes on vacation and the other one has a sick kid for a few days, there could be a gap in care and assistance. With a licensed home care agency, we have a team of people and are often able to go ahead and to provide a substitute caregiver so that there's continuity of help when a family's expecting it. And then lastly, counsel on care. What happens when there's a new question that comes up? Or how do you determine, should we add more hours? Or should we talk to a placement specialist to think maybe it's time for mom and dad to move out? What are other ways that the home could be made more safe for the hours that we're not receiving home care? Well, again, a licensed home care company is constantly consulting with families and helping them know about ways to modify the home, helping them introduce them to ways that might be able to pay for home care and reduce their out of pocket. So, simply having that subject matter expert relationship is key to be able to not just affect costs, but to improve safety. So, this picture here is a picture that, as I conclude my section on in home care, of Mrs. P. Mrs. P was a client of our particular agency for about 7 years, and we had the privilege of caring for her well into her 10th decade. Um, One of the ways, even though she was a remarkable example of health and endurance, moving about with just the assistance of a walker to the point that she was 103 and 104, she was actively knitting and crocheting different things that she donated to the local assistance league of her local city to be part of raising scholarship funds for high school women to help them advance in their career. She's just a great example of where getting the amount of support you need, but allowing you to still serve your community, to go to your same salon. Mrs. P went to her same hairstylist every single week on Friday afternoons, and to be able to maintain these rhythms that helped her feel connected and to help her feel like she is still giving and participating. Her home and support in her home was a way to be able to have that. Now, not everybody has that same gift of longevity, but I know it's the mission of any home care provider to be able to help make a dream like Mrs. P's happen, to keep continuity of their life and their rhythm, keep them connected into their local community, and to maintain stability as much as possible. However, as I said, that's not every person's situation. And often, due to health, or even just looking at the finances as more help is required, there's other options to be considered. And fortunately, there are options and specialists to help you with that. So, Kenny, I'd like to go ahead and transition to you to help us talk more about what about when the right time comes for the ideal move away from home, given a person's circumstances.
Thanks, Tanner. So there are multiple types of places where you go to send your loved one, your older adult. And these prices might be a little lower because, as most people know, if they've been reading current events, labor inflation. Labor costs have really caused what inflation's done the last couple of years the most. But we're in the general area, so it's not all about the exact amounts. It's about your options, right? And what's the best option for your loved one based on your needs and wants. And the three big ones are geography. Where do I want to live or them to live? Budget. Everybody has one. And once in a while, I have people with unlimited budget. It's nice, but it's fairly unrealistic. And care needs. Is it cognitive? Is it more the physical, or is it both? So there's these bigger places called independent living, assisted living, and they usually have a memory care component, like on one floor. And they're all based off different. The independent assisted living, it's basically the same person. The difference between assisted living and independent living is that you might need some care. So if I moved in, I didn't need any care, I'd be independent. If Josh moved in, who's on this call, and he needed help with just the med management section, he wasn't comfortable with taking his pills, he would be considered assisted living because he's getting some assistance, right? And so they price it off room and board plus whatever care. And some of the places are basic, and some go all the way up to basically a cruise ship on land. And it just depends on the budget, like I said, but they all provide 24/7 care if needed. So the difference of, let's say Tanner's bringing someone in 8 hours a day, the other 16 hours you're on your own or you have a family member. The difference in these places is that they all have 24/7 caregivers, med techs, nurses, sometimes 24/7, sometimes 18 hours a day, what have you. So it's there. The difference on them, you're not getting a one-to-one care like Tanner said. There might be 120 people in the building. 60 of them need care, 60 are independent. And with that, you might have 6 caregivers total, med techs. So you might not be able to, within a minute, get that assistance. So that's just the differences on that. Next slide, Tanner. So here's where you get that care really on top of you, but you give up something. So these boarding care homes are CFEs. It stands for Residential Care for the Elderly. They only have 6 beds. They could take 6 people. That's what they're licensed for. And we're both Tanner's world, my world. We're in the Department of Social Services. And I'll take a step back when we get to the nursing homes and kind of explain where insurance comes and where it doesn't and the oversight. But these homes have advantages because there's 2 caregivers. So you guys are all, I'm sure, math geniuses. 6 residents divided by 2 caregivers, you have a 3-to-1 ratio. You can't get at that at the big places. Even the most expensive big places might be 4-to-1, maybe 3-to-1. So why are we doing this? This is for care, right? It's all about the caregiver. That's why Tanner's team goes in there. That's why you go in there. It's the most important aspect. If you need some assistance, if you're independent, it might be more the socialization. If you're independent, I would never recommend here. You would never go to a boarding care. The advantage of these places, caregiving ratio, the nutrition, the food is cooked in the kitchen right there. They basically cook whatever you want. If Josh and I went into a place like this, Josh might be a pancake and waffle guy, and that's why he walked this morning because he's trying to work off those carbs. But I might be just an omelet guy, and they'll do that. And then Josh might be a practicing Catholic, and he needs to have fish on Fridays. They'll provide that. So that's kind of a nice thing. The other thing is it's an easy acclimatization. You're going from one house to another house, not to a big place. So, I find out the needs and wants. I ask a lot of questions about the loved one, and I have a better idea where I could recommend, but I'm never going to tell anybody what to do or where to go. And the last thing, financially, if you need care, it's probably a better deal than the bigger place on the previous page, the assisted living or memory care, because they price it all together. At the big place, you have room and board. Let's say that's $4,000 a month, and they price your care because you need a lot of it at $3,000. You're at $7,000. You can move into a boarding care maybe at $4,000. What you give up, right? There's always the pros and cons. You don't have the social interaction. You don't have an activity calendar where there's things going on all the time. Now, if you have dementia and you need help with a lot of your physical activities of daily living, like the grooming and dressing, then maybe it's not that important, and that's why this is a good option. So that's kind of a summary on that. And there's shared rooms and private rooms. And these ranges could go, about 3,000, maybe 3,300 now in the San Fernando Valley in some towns. all the way up to $12,000 to $13,000 private, which is kind of crazy, right? But it is what it is. Next page. So memory care is in that same place, the bigger place of assisted living or independent living. Some places are just memory care only. They concentrate it like a bigger building that have 80, 90, 60 beds. But in the assisted living, independent living community, memory care is usually 20 to 30 beds. It's not as big as the other place. It's got separate caregivers. You eat separately. You have your activities separately. There is some interaction. They do offsite excursions. Oh yeah, I left that out. A bigger place also, they'll go maybe to the casino or the museum or shopping or out for lunch, and they'll take memory care residents too if it's safe and they're capable. The boarding care, you're kind of there. I won't say the word stuck, but they don't do that type of thing. Also, the bigger places have transportation up to usually 10 miles, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, things like that. They use the van to go on excursions. The boarding care does not have that. Next. Here comes the nursing homes. Oh, so this is a little, so this is a CLHF.
This is very interesting for what Nick
What's that?
and Janelle are dealing with. All the pricing and everything.
Yeah, I mean, the pricing, like I said, I even think Tanner's prices have gone up too because these people require, a little more money. I mean, I don't know if the people in Pasadena, but they just passed the $20 fast
Okay.
food.
Yeah.
So but the prices are close, right? And it's all, I help negotiate that too. So I know the places that might have more openings, they're more likely to do so. So the congregate living and health facilities, this is something that Medi-Cal could hopefully pick up. It's expensive. It's $700 a day on average. It's around 20 grand a month. What this is special about, it's a boarding care home setting of 6 beds, but it's like a skilled nursing facility. It's fully medical. This is not Department of Social Services, Department of Public Health. So COVID started in these skilled nursing facilities, rehab centers, nursing home, convalescent homes. They're all the same thing. They're synonymous terms. This is wonderful environment for your loved one, and Medi-Cal does pick up some of it, so it's not nearly as bad. And there's many, not a lot, but there are some around. I've placed a few in there, and it's by far the healthy, it's an ideal environment if the stars align, so to say. But I don't want to get too much into it. It's not that common. But if something comes up, I always have answers for them. Next, this has got to be the nursing homes, right? Next, let's see. Okay, so the SNFs, we call them SNFs because it's skilled nursing facilities, right? Rehabs. This is Department of Health, Public Health. Your insurance pays for this. Your insurance, health insurance, does not pay for me in Tanner's world. Okay, that's custodial caregiving. That is out of pocket or long-term care insurance. We're going to talk about how you pay for it later. But this is a little different, but it comes up a lot. And so they always ask me, well, does my Medicare or Medi-Cal pay for my assisted living? No, Medi-Cal a little. If we have time, I'll touch on it for a minute. But Medicare doesn't. The federal government's not paying for your caregiving. They're expecting you to save. And so insurance, so sometimes you can be in a skilled nursing facility. And a lot of times you're there after a hospital, they discharge you there, but eventually it's usually a short-term solution. You eventually have to go home and get care at home if you still need care, or go to a community. And they're not great places. They charge us taxpayers a lot of money to do it. All I say is that there's one nurse for maybe 20 patients and ER patients in this place. Me and Tanner live in the world of residents. We're not medical. We're in communities. We're in homes. We're not clinical. But it's not the ideal place, but it's a short term. If you have general Medicare, right, just basic Medicare, you can stay in a skilled nursing facility for a longer period of time. I've had clients been in there for a year or two, and they can't just kick you out if you're homeless, you don't have a place. But it's not a long-term solution 95% of the time. Okay, next. Okay, independent living homes. This is for truly independent. There's an independent living that I mentioned about assisted living. This is for people who completely can do on their own. There's no caregiving. There's no backstop. It's for basically low income people who don't have any savings, who need to live somewhere. There is a house manager that cooks all the meals and sometimes laundry. Sometimes it's shared room, sometimes it's not. But for $1,000, $1,200, for a shared $1,400, depending on where, you can have 3 meals, snacks, have a nice little social environment with other people, and it's really a lifesaver. The downside is they're not licensed, they're not advertised, they're very hard to find. Through my network, I know people that own some, and I probably know 10 or 15 places, 20 places, but there's probably over 100. In San Diego, they have a central website, so they all get together. So I can do it there, but I don't go down there that often. I like them to do it in LA. I've talked to some owners about it, but there's no financial incentive to do it. But they are ideal to consider that you can live. It's like renting a place, right? Rent an apartment, it's $1,400, but they're including the food and the cooking. So it's kind of a halfway there in between. So that's kind of nice. Next. So the nursing homes, won't get much into it. You could read it. But the nursing homes, you can get med management in the assisted living. That's number 2, right? So you can. That's not a big deal. You can be bedridden and you can be on hospice, and Tanner can take care of it. There's no reason, there's nothing, you don't need to be in a nursing home in that environment. I'm not a big fan of nursing homes. They provide their short-term solution, but what COVID did to people. And if you know any places, if you know Pasadena up on Fair Oaks, there's a bunch of them up there. One got shut down right away. 7 people died, and they've had trouble with probably 3/4 of them. And they get a lot of money from the government, $400, $500, $600 a day. They put 2 to 3 to a room. That's all our money. Where do you think that money's coming from? The taxpayer. So I'm not a huge fan. I just don't think it's the right solution, except just being discharged from the hospital, getting over a broken hip or a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and then moving on to the next and best thing. Next. So payment options. Do you want to do that, Tanner? Since you're good
Sure.
at the
Yep,
money.
absolutely. So
It's relevant for both sides, just so you guys know. You have to pay for this somehow, for his care or for the home. Go ahead.
That's right. Yeah. And Kenny, thanks for the way you've already kind of framed, especially this distinction between what is healthcare and what is the title we've used as custodial care or like personal care. So how do I pay for the personal care categories that Medicare, and because it's not due to a hospital, is going to help with? Well, the first things you might think of is, well, out of pocket. And what does out of pocket look like for most aging individuals and retirees? It could be just paying out of whatever forms of pension and income they're having every month. That's often one of the first, I think, frames of mind that families I speak with is they're thinking, all right, we earn X amount, factor out what we have for property taxes, insurance, what's left for home care. And certainly that's a way to start with it. There could be pension income that comes. Perhaps an individual was working for a school district or a large employer that still does have some kind of defined benefit pension program. Not very many of those anymore, or savings. Obviously, well, not always, because I have provided care for people that are under the age of 65, even under the age of 50 due to their health condition. But often people are eligible to withdraw from their IRAs or their 401ks. And again, this is still generally under the category of saving. All stuff that really comes to all of your minds. I know I'm speaking to an intelligent audience. But I'll cover just the next 2 here, Kenny, and you can talk about some of the others. Reverse mortgages. Now, reverse mortgage is typically not going to be a way of converting equity in your home to paying for care if you're going to move out of the home. Because a reverse mortgage does require the person, the owner, to live in the home. So it is a way of being able to pay for in-home care. If somebody, their ongoing income or the degree of their savings that they're comfortable spending, they come to a point of getting that down, you could turn to a reverse mortgage. Now, even with the way you phrase that, I almost want to take that back. I think many people think, oh, reverse mortgage, this must be a last ditch resort. And rightly, people have been spending 30 plus years of their life trying to turn a mortgage balance into zero. It was a day to celebrate for people who have paid off their homes, if they're in that category. And the idea of borrowing more can feel like it's going backwards. But there are individuals, even lawyers, financial advisors, that will choose to pay for necessary care using a reverse mortgage before they will touch any kind of investment accounts, or before they will even touch savings. Because they're factoring in what is the cost, what are the current interest rates, but they're thinking about other costs. If you have to sell, stock to be able to do it, what kind of capital gains are you going to be paying? Or what if you're at a point where the stock market crested just 3 months ago, and now, due to just the environment, those stock values are plummeting? Do you want to go ahead and sell stocks that you think could easily, with just some time, get back to their value and get the full value of it? Or if you need money now, you can do on a reverse mortgage, pay for care you might need now, and then consider selling stocks at a later time. So to think wisely about this, it's just important not to be penny wise and pound foolish, and to ensure that we are considering individuals considering all their options. And to this, I would say, speak with the financial advisors in your life, your accountant, your financial advisor. And here's another really helpful part of the foundation I'm thankful for. I know many people don't necessarily have that trusted advisor, or maybe you have outlived that trusted advisor and their time in practice. At the Foundation for Senior Services, there are many of these professionals, legal and financial, that are part of this Find a Specialist sort of program. And we're more than happy to connect any individual who's scratching their head, wondering what the best way to even come up with the how to pay solution for home care or assisted living, that could help really figure out what's best for that individual. And then the last thing I'll add here before I turn to Kenny to speak about more is the VA, Veterans Administration, has a couple of key programs that can help pay for care at home or a facility. First is what's called we often, as insiders, call it A&A. It stands for Aid and Attendance. What is it? It is an additional pension that a veteran honorably discharged can receive, but that pension must go towards paying for direct care assistance, paying for caregiving support in the home, or helping to pay for the costs of living in an assisted living or a board and care or that type of environment. There are income ceilings to this program. So it is mostly targeted towards veterans who are on the more lower income side. Generally, your income is going to need to be under $2,000 a month, and they do have an asset limit. It doesn't include the value of your primary home or one vehicle, but if you've got all those collector cars or a huge real estate portfolio, that could probably put somebody quickly out of being within the ballpark for this particular option. But for those who qualify, it's a huge help. And it also can provide help for the surviving spouses of military veterans. And there's actually more money that comes if the couple is married, and especially if the couple's married and both happen to be veterans. We don't have as many of those combinations, out there. But that could unlock anywhere from, a little over $1,000 a month to close to $3,000 a month, depending on the number of veterans and the marriage situation. And one more thing that's not on here is there's a second program from the VA, and it's basically a prescription that could be written by the VA healthcare system for in-home care. That is called the Homemaker Home Health Aid Program. And the good news about that is that there are no income restrictions. People could have all the assets and all the income they need, but if they schedule an appointment with a primary care physician at any one of the VA clinics or the hospitals, and you do need help with your activities of daily living, then they will go ahead and basically write a prescription where you can get a weekly amount of, not much, but 7 to about 16 hours a week of care that the VA will just basically pay for in perpetuity. So again, it's a small amount of help, but if small is all somebody needs, it's a great program that, again, doesn't have any financial strings or qualifications to it. Kenny, I'll pass it to you to talk about long-term care insurance.
So that's monthly, and that is very low too. This slide maybe is a little older. I mean, it's only maybe a year old, but shared room. I showed somebody yesterday in Van Nuys, a shared room. She was independent. It was $1,850 a month. It's a huge room. That's why I went to Van Nuys. She lives in Arcadia, but she's willing to go over there. So those cards are monthly. And the veterans stuff can help out a lot. Long-term care insurance, 6% of older adults have it. If you get in your 60s, it's probably a little late because you don't have as many years to pay. I'm 59 in a couple of weeks, and I got it 5 years ago. And I pay a decent amount, but I'm going to have a good benefit, like $500,000-$600,000 at my disposal in 25 years or 23 years. And it's something that you have to plan for. I know somebody who started in their 40s and they pay $20 a week. That's it. On average, 1,000 a year. She says, I'll buy one less bottle of wine and I'll be so much happier. I said, you're going to be so happy because when we get to that older, when we get in our 70s, it's like, why didn't we save? When they're 50s, like, I don't need it. What is this? And a lot of people aren't educated, but it's a lifesaver. I wish more people would. The next one is the life insurance. If you have a life insurance. So I deal with a lot of low income clients. I have all across the board, but I deal with a big foundation of Reseda that gives me lots of low income clients, basically living Social Security, zero savings, very difficult. But some of them have a life insurance policy from their previous employer. You might be in a big employer, but it was very more of a menial job. That's why their Social Security is low, but they have some. You've been paying into it and you need care. You can cash out that policy and get a lump sum cash payment. We have a great gentleman in the foundation, Irv Selman, who specializes in that. But the thing is, it's really important for your care. And I've had people say, I have it, but I want to leave it for my kids. The kids, the adult children, most adult children, even in the lower income, they don't want it. Like, mom, your care is more important. Take the 20 grand, the 40 grand, or 60 grand and use it for yourself. So that's an option. That's a life settlement. The long-term care insurance of the care rider. We'll get into too many details about that. We'll move on to the next slide. But there are options. I want to see the next slide, Tanner, before I do it. Okay, so I'll talk about the ALW real quick. And by the way, Sally, how are you, love? I just saw you there, my friend. See you all the time. You look great. I love the haircut, by the way. Stylish, very stylish look. So there's something called the Assisted Living Waiver Program. So this is a program that helps low income, under $2,000 a month total income, eliminates stand income, Social Security, everything. Jesse, if you can mute, please. So here's the advantage of it. I don't want to get into it. It takes a long time. I spend lots of time with clients on it. But you can get into a place that takes the ALW, the Assisted Living Waiver Program. It costs you $1,400 a month, $1,398 if you qualify. The state, the taxpayers will pay between $3,100 and $5,300 a month, depending on how much care you need. So think about it: $1,400 to get basically like a $6,000 place. That's the world I live in a lot of times. There's a waiting list because it's so popular. It's not that bad. You need to have dementia or mild cognitive impairment or help with those two activities of daily living. And I'm not sure if you guys know what the activities of daily living are, but help with showering, getting in and out of bed, transferring, grooming, teeth, hair, changing clothes, ambulation, be able to move, be able to feed yourself. I'm leaving one out. And then there's also bed management. So those are the things we're talking about. Okay. Not cooking, shopping, or driving. Those are independent activities of daily living, but those are what they look at the state in terms of determining what kind of care you need. It's a great option. Even if you don't have $1,400, the federal government, because this is a Medi-Cal program, Sacramento, but Washington, D.C. will come in and bump up and give you money to make it to that $1,398 and then some. They'll leave you some money. It's fantastic. It's a lifesaver for low income older adults, and I love it. All right, so I like this slide. There's really 4 types of people, right? I'm about to show a place tomorrow to a lady who is an advanced planner. The last one, they're very rare. Doesn't happen often. I wish there were more. They usually have money. They usually have saved. They know what they want to do. It's just a time where it is. But it's unfortunately the first 3. You're in a crisis. Something happened. I have one where a lady just broke her hip. And I'm waiting for her she got out of the hospital. She's now in a skilled nursing facility, short term. And when she gets out, she agreed with her 2 daughters, adult children, that she will move into a community. She doesn't have a whole lot of money, so she can't really employ Tanner because she only has about $4,500, and she really needs care most of the time. So she's open-minded in the sense. And here's another reason why that number is 80%, 20%. It is because people want to stay at home. Also perception. A lot of these older adults, 75, 80, 85, 90, when they were in their 50s, 40s, there was no assisted living really existed. There was these nursing home type things, but there wasn't like a decent place. I mean, the Highland up in Pasadena, the Kenton and Sierra Madre, they didn't exist. Some of these places were hotels that they took over and converted. Whereas perception versus reality, I've had more than I can count that said, Kenny, you're a nice young gentleman, but I don't want to go to some nursing home where they're all drooling in a wheelchair, a shawl over their shoulder, and eating really crappy, mushy food. And I'm like, okay. And you could talk to them until your tongue is tied and they won't believe you because they're setting their mind. I'm setting my mind and I'm only 59 and I'm stubborn. So it's a nuance. So that's, if you get them to see a place, a lot of times like, oh, wow. Like the old Palmolive commercial. Oh, you're soaking in it. They don't even notice. And it's kind of nice, but perception is very important. So that wanted to do it. So they'll only go if they have to, sometimes physically, and sometimes they won't even do that. You can't physically force anybody into an assisted living, independent living, memory care, unless there's a conservatorship. Then they don't have the capacity to make the right decision, a healthy decision. Otherwise, they have to be open-minded enough to at least look and try it out. All these places are month to month. There's no security deposit. There's no last, no first. You just pay as you go. There's no financial background that they look at, like if you're renting an apartment to make sure you can afford the lease and stuff like that. So you can come and go and try it out. So that makes it a lot easier too. When there's reluctant consenters, they're only pushed into the decision because their adult children are most kind of forcing them and they realize maybe it's the right time. And then the scariest ones are the scramblers and wake-up callers. And I call the wake-up callers the near misses. I had one situation in Oakland where a sister called me up and she was on dialysis. The lady in Oakland, I'll end with this. She goes dialysis Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Saturday afternoon, the van dropped her off. And she lives by herself, right? She's independent. She got up at night to go to the bathroom. She's not incontinent. And she slipped. And she fell. She broke a bone. And she's not great with technology. She couldn't find her phone. Her vision's not great. She was on the floor, and I'm not joking, until Tuesday. This was Sunday early morning, right? Saturday night, Sunday. The van to pick her up for dialysis, she didn't come. They know something like that. They called the sheriff. Sheriff came in, knocked down the door, and she was on the ground, still alive. They got her to the hospital. She's fine. The sister said, "You're moving down here to Altadena yesterday." So that's a wake-up call, right? She could have been passed away. Next page. So we'll go through this quickly. It's already 11. When you move into a community, I mentioned there's our registered nurses, licensed nurse practitioners, and the like, med techs, and you have caregiving 24 hours a day if needed. The best example is this for if you're a baseball, if you know baseball. The pitcher and catcher throw the ball, catch it, and throw it back. And in a baseball field, there's a backstop behind the catcher, right? So balls don't go by and foul balls don't get hit. If the ball gets by the catcher has the backstop. The backstop is this right here. It's there if you need it. Next. Okay, so we talked about social cohesion. You know, aborting care doesn't have as much as the bigger places. That sucks. Sorry. But what you have, you know, if someone's aging in place, if they have a spouse, it's a whole different story. But when you're by yourself and you can't drive and there's not a whole lot of friends nearby, you know, you don't have a lot of social cohesion interaction. If you're semi-independent, you need a caregiver 4 hours a day, you have family around, stuff like that, then this isn't relevant. But for a lot of people, they don't have that. And what you get in this community is invaluable. Next page. So financial, it adds up when you get a caregiver. You get a personal caregiver at your home. It's, you know, that's awesome. I mean, that is, you know, that's a concierge care service. And what Tanner offers is invaluable. And if you can afford it and you have some social cohesion, I recommend my clients that they do that. It's one reason why only 20% move in. But when you don't, or you have a financial constraints, then it's where the bigger place or the boarding care really makes more financial sense from a pure dollar sense. Don't think about, social or cognitive or happiness. It's just sometimes you can't afford something. You got to be practical and honest with yourself. After 6 hours a day at $35 an hour, you're in a mid-level place. If you're looking at a lower cost place, it might only be equivalent of 4 hours of care. So you have to weigh up how much care does my loved one need? How much money do I have? What is practical? What can we do? But if it's a dollar cents comparison, of course, the bigger place is going to be a better value because you don't have one-on-one care. So questions. Let me think if I left something out that I was thinking about. No, we can probably bring some up. All right, we're all open for questions right now. We did pretty well on time.
Great. Yes.
Yeah, sure. You can just shout out. If there's two people shouting out, we'll figure it out.
Hi. The last page on the financial, I didn't understand how you're supposed to figure out, like, if it's 4 hours of care and it's $30 an hour and you only need, okay, you need
Excuse me, Tanner, are we closer to 35? Do we want to use as a number, or do we want to still use 30?
We can, and we're definitely at close to 30 if people are like more than 40 hours a week, at least in our case. But we can do 35. Let's do that. Because that's what it is, especially if you're doing like a 4 hour like part-time.
Yeah, let's assume it's 4 hours, 35 times 120, right? 4 times 30 days, right?
Okay.
4 hours times 30 days. You got that? That's 120. Yeah. And 35, so that's about $4,000, I think, off the top of my head, if I'm doing it
for the month. For the month.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you have 4 hours, you're probably not getting a lot. You probably don't need a lot of care, right, Tanner? Because that's right on the lower end. So like to like, you probably don't need a lot of care on the assisted living. You might need just a level 1 or 2, which might be some shower help and maybe med management, right? So let's keep it, because I want to be like to like. You can move into, there's lots of places that will be able to hit that budget. The difference is when Tanner's caregiver leaves, right? God forbid something happens. You're paying for only the care, Ms. Vic, at, let's say, a Brookdale, okay, in Monrovia. You're only paying but you're paying for the care you need, but you have a pendant, or you have something in your room, and if something happens, if you don't come down for breakfast, they'll come on and check on you. So you have that oversight. It's a little, I guess, peace of mind, knowing that you're in a building where that's what they do, right?
And they feed you also, right?
Also, they feed you 3 meals a day, right? Okay. Tanner's not buying, the steak and lobster for your client as much as he'd like to, but his wife would kill him if he's spending all his money on steak and lobster for his clients. But you have all that. You have the excursion. Everything's paid for. Electricity. There's if you have a house gardening, all that is included in there. Okay. So you have to build that into what your monthly expenses are, and that takes that number. It gets a little more elastic. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. How about you, Sally? You have anything out there in your large brain in there? She's good. So I was going to say, if you guys can get Medi-Cal, if you know someone, it's a great thing to have, especially if you know someone under 2,000 income. There'll be no share cost. But even if it's like 2,200 or something like that, the reason why I say it is Medi-Cal provides things above and beyond that Medicare does. So Medicare is a federal program for older adults and disabled. Medi-Cal is a state program, Medicaid in every other state. California has to be different, of course. And they will provide a little more. A lot of people are Medi. They have both. A lot of my clients. And so I'll give you one example of a benefit. Leave it there because this is not what the programs of this talks about, but we can do one on that too. I've become pretty proficient in that. If you have to go to a skilled nursing facility, in general, Medicare only will pay for up to 20 days in that facility. It might be a little more. They might not even work with certain facilities because they don't get paid as much for it. So there's a little nuances. Medi-Cal pays for 100 days, straight up to 100 days. The co-payment in some of these places is around 130, 140, 160 a day. So do the math. And if you have both, you get 120 days, 20 in Medicare, 100 of Medi-Cal. But if you only had Medicare, let's say there's two people in a room, roommates, because they put two or three in a room often. And let's say, me and Tanner are in a room. I have only Medicare. We're in there for the same ailment. On the 21st day, I'm going to start getting hit for about 140 a day. Tanner, because he's much smarter than me, and that's true in many ways, he got Medi-Cal on top of his Medicare. He might be paying a couple $100 a month for it, but he's not that well. He knows that there's a lot of benefit. He's getting those extra 80 days. 80 days times $140 a day is about $11,000 a month. I don't have $11,000 a month. They're going to ask me to leave. Okay. I mean, if I'm homeless, they'll keep me there. They'll work it out, but someone's getting billed in my family. If they know it, they're going to find it. These guys are really good at finding where they're going to get paid. I've had many clients where the sister lives up in Sonoma and she got a bill. Because they always ask emergency contact. Is there a power of attorney? Is there a responsible party? So if you can get Medi-Cal, and I'd be glad to talk to you about it. I can put my phone number in the chat, I guess. Right, Tanner? I'd be glad to talk about that or anything. Or you can reach out to the foundation and ask for either one of us. But Medi-Cal is a good thing most of the time. It doesn't hurt. It's a nice little backstopper. Impossible. Yes, Allie. Are you on mute? Can't hear you.
She's off mute on Zoom, but maybe something with her computer microphone?
Sign language? Braille?
All right. Yeah, it's not coming through, unfortunately, Sally. It's probably something with the individual microphone settings with your computer, because you are off mute on Zoom. Maybe while you tinker around with that, any other questions from some other members, and hopefully Sally can get things ironed out here soon. All right, Jesse, just want to let you know I got your email here as well. So for those of you who aren't able to see the chat very easily, if you would like a PDF copy of this presentation, I'd be more than happy to share it with you. Please just make sure that in the chat you go ahead and type in your email so I know where to send it and it gets to the right place. If you are having issues or don't feel comfortable doing that with chat, once we get to the very end after a Q&A, which is just around the corner, I can try to have you spell it out and write it down. But chat is definitely much easier for me, so long as there's no typos. So
let me get to a question. Toby has a question. There are many different kinds of assisted living out there. I assume assisted living communities. And they're including CCRCs, I think is what you're talking about, right? And I'll explain that. What resources do you have to help? All right. So I didn't really want to get this into a pitch about myself. I talk to families. I find out what their needs and wants are, Toby. And then I show them places. I've seen over 1,200 places, most of them boarding cares. I cover from, I just placed somebody in Menifee 2 weeks ago to Santa Clarita. I've done Bakersfield, Oceanside. I'm all over. I was in Laguna Woods 2 days ago. So I sit down and find out what you are. And I go on the tours. I set them up. I help negotiate. I'm here with every step of the way. So I do everything as a full concierge advocate. Just so you guys know, I didn't bring this up. CCRCs, Continuing Care Retirement Communities. Villa Gardens on Villa Street off Lake in Pasadena. There's places in Bradbury, Duarte, there's Fullerton, there's 5 in Orange County. These places are like the assisted living, independent living, memory care, but they also have a skilled nursing facility on site. So you can truly age in place. The difference is most of these have a country club type pricing. Not in a country club, but basically it's a one-time fee, right? They get equity, they use your money to run the place, and then monthly. To give you an idea, the place, there's some, I mean, they range, but Montecedro and Altadena, a 2-bedroom, they'll last for $1.4 million. And then you have 6,000-7,000 monthly. You do get most of that money back, 50, 75%, 90% back if you choose. When you pass, it goes to your state or your beneficiaries. But it's really just, these places are higher end. They're wonderful. They're not for the low income. They don't exist for low income, but it's nice that you get sick, you go to a hospital instead of going to a regular sniff where the COVID and all, they have doctors on call. They're not on duty. you go to almost like a private SNF. So there's advantages to that. And I knew place people in CCRCs, Toby. I know a lot about them. That's where you really have to get into your financials. And usually I work with a financial planner on that too, because there's some choices on how much you want to put down and so some nuances. But that's there. Let's see if there's any other questions. Is it better to rent your house, home, and use this to pay? Once again, financial. Tanner talks about where your investments are. You know, my son, my mom bought him a bunch of Apple stock 8 years ago, and he needs to sell it. It's gone down $20 in the last 2 months. Is it the best time to sell it? Maybe he wants to wait for it goes up. He owes a lot of money in taxes. So he's going to use that. So you have to look at a lot of different. What can your house rent for? What will it cost you, Marie, to where you're going to go? So it's a lot of opportunity costs, economic. You know, it's kind of like financial modeling. But if you can rent your house well, right, and you're using that as income, and you can live in something that may be a little less expensive, that you don't need that much of a home to live in, then yeah, it might make a lot of sense. And obviously, you can talk to you about that. And I assume you'd move into a place, so you'd call me, not Tanner. So definitely an option on that. I know people who do that. When you rent a home, that's rental income, that's income. So if you're talking people trying to get a Medi-Cal and the assisted living waiver program, renting a home might not be the best thing to do. I've had somebody sell their home, keep the money in a checking account. I know that sounds crazy, not earning any interest, but if it's in a checking account, there's no income, and they qualify for the ALW. Lots of nuance, not so much nuances, different situations for everybody, and everybody's individualistic. Just like Tanner says, when they do a care plan, everything's catered to them. Not one plan is exactly the same. There's not just one answer for everybody. It all depends on your needs and wants. So I end with that. It's all about your needs and wants.
That is true. Well, Kenny, it seems like that's probably a good time for me to pull up the slides
Yeah.
to wrap us and bring us to a conclusion here.
Correct.
And again, if there are further questions, I'll be able to linger a little bit longer, probably about 11:25 is my latest cutoff. If there's any more questions that might pop up. But I want to let you, I mean, obviously we had about 25 people that were here at our peak that found value in joining us today. We want to let you know about other educational opportunities that the foundation mentioned that the third of the 4 offerings of the foundation to support our community is our Call Companion program. This is where trained volunteers will make outbound phone calls to shut-in individuals who are not able to come out and socialize. It's a chance both to have a regular connection to provide that relationship and mental stimulation that Kenny has talked about, you know, being one of the benefits being in a large community can provide. But there's also a safety element. If that person doesn't answer those phone calls, then our volunteers are trained to reach out so that the sheriff or others can knock on the door and make sure there hasn't been any kind of emergency. So it's a real help to those in the community. And the foundation would like to know both if you know someone who would benefit from receiving a call, and if you know somebody who might want to volunteer as a way of investing their time to help others. So if you want to know more, you can email info@thefss.org. So we have shorter emails than our website, which is foundationforservices.org. All right, so here is both Kenny's and my contact information, as well as that of the executive team of the foundation. Also want to take a moment to thank several other volunteer members of the foundation who have joined us here in this call. I don't know if they've made it here all the way to the end, but I saw another co-group leader, Josh Arce. We had Jasmine, who's a member of our, who volunteers her time as part of the San Gabriel Valley area chapter, which we call Verdugo Foothills. So thank you all for members who have come to join and support, and to be ready to be able to chime in and offer input to many of the questions that our attendees ask. Kenny, anything else you want to offer as we otherwise just kind of leave this information up for a bit and see if there's any lingering questions?
No, I got to run out, but I will tell you, Josh is a great resource. They have a company called the Brain Cell. If there's cognitive issues, a specialist when it comes to cognitive impairment, how it affects your life, your lifestyle, family, or whatever like that, you can always find him through the foundation. But what him and his partner do is excellent, and they really just narrow it down to that. and how do you live with that, I guess, impairment, Josh, or whatever that condition. I mean, but he's a newer group leader, and he's a great resource. And I even tried to helped out his mom. So I got to know him personally, and he's a great guy. So we have great people at the foundation. Use the resource. We're vetted. We're not here to sell anything. We're here to provide those needs, meet those needs and wants wherever they may go.
Thank you, Kenny.
Yep. All right. If that's it, then thank you, everybody.
Yep.
I'm going to run
Oh,
out. I have to be in Burbank by a quarter of Sally, I hope you get your voice back. You have my card. If you get that question, reach out to me. I'll answer it. If I can't, I'll have Tanner or somebody else do it. Okay. Awesome.
Great. I'll go ahead and stop our
Kenny.
recording.
Thanks, Tanner.
And then again, while Kenny heads out, I can stay here. And there's a couple more things here in the chat. Let me just stop our recording.